Right, everyone, welcome to the final part of this series with Botanica Health, Elevate Your Immunity with Herbs. Today, we're going to be talking about acute support and recovery. And I've got some questions from part one of the series, which happened on Friday, and I'm going to get to those at the end of today's presentation. I'm just going to fire up my feed here on my phone so that I can catch up with any live comments. Okay, awesome. Thanks for tuning in today. Thank you so much. So just a quick note, if you haven't watched Friday's webinar yet, part one, you can go back onto the Botanica page. It is archived right there. We've got so much good feedback and a lot of views on that video. So, thank you for tuning in, and I hope you learned a lot. Today should be equally valuable. And if you have any questions, please fire them off in the comment section on Facebook. You can also use the chat box or the Q&A if you are on this Zoom webinar. So let's hop right into it. And, just once again, we're all under a lot of stress right now. We're all looking for ways to support ourselves, whether it's immune health, whether it's stress. And I do have to just remind you that at current time of recording, we do not have any known cures or treatments for coronavirus and COVID-19. So really the emphasis today is going to be how to support ourselves naturally and build immunity and build resilience. So my name is Brett Hawes. I am a clinical nutritionist and functional medicine practitioner with 15 years of clinical experience, trained in iridology and a few other modalities as well. I spent many years teaching at the Institute of Holistic Nutrition as lead faculty. I've coached and mentored practitioners and currently run my platform called Holistic Health Masterclass. If you haven't dialed into my podcast, you can do that. Just visit the website, holistichealthmasterclass.com. And let's hop into today's presentation. So Botanica, in case you didn't catch part one, who is Botanica as a company? Botanica, out of all the companies I train for, are without a doubt my favorite company, not just because they're Canadian, but because they really, really focus on the quality of ingredients that are coming all the way from where we grow it and the farmers that we work with, right the way into our products. Let me just check one thing here. I want to make sure that everything is good with the feed. So give me 1 second. Okay, not sure why the webinar is not showing up. Right, I'm not sure why people are not able to get into the webinar. Okay, I'm gonna just keep going because we are on Facebook Live. So if you're not catching this on Zoom, please go on to the Facebook page. Oh. Okay, I think we now have our feed on Zoom. Okay, great. So thank you so much. I think we're good. Okay, awesome. So for those of you joining on Zoom, I apologize. That was a technical hiccup. So thank you for joining. And for those of you on Facebook, thank you for your patience. I'm just going to jump right back into it here. Botanica is a Canadian company that focuses on whole plant-based ingredients, whole foods. We don't like to use isolated extracts when it comes to herbs. So we're very much focused on whole herbs and whole superfoods that are pesticide-free, chemical-free, non-GMO, and all of that good stuff. We like to partner with artisans of not just great nutrition, but also people that have really, really mastered their own craft process. Whether that is our liquid capsules or our tinctures or our ferments, but we like to partner with people that are experts in that. B Corp certification is a standard that also caters to environmental stewardship and also ties in socioeconomics and social performance as well. So our goal here is really to make herbs and superfoods easy to understand and easy to use as part of your daily nutrition. Just want to make sure that I'm catching up with the live feed here. So forgive me if I'm jumping around a little bit. Okay. For some reason, we are now not live on Facebook. Okay. So please bear with me, everyone. We seem to have had some technical hiccups here. I'm just going to get the live feed up on Facebook. Thank you for your patience. It does happen from time to time that we have issues with the technical side of things. So I'm just going to fire up the live stream on Facebook because I see that it's actually ended for some reason. And then we're going to jump right back into our presentation. Okay, so bear with me. Thanks for the support on Zoom, everyone. It's never fun having technical issues. Okay, cool. Right, we're good. I'm literally just going to hit the go live button. And of course, we're recording this whole presentation, glitches and all. So let's just see. I think our live feed is up. Okay, perfect. All right, so we're back on Facebook Live. Zoom is up. I think we're good to go. And you know what? We're really getting into the meat and potatoes of it all anyway. Right now, just a quick reminder for anyone joining this video, we are not making any claims or cures or treatments for coronavirus at this time. We are really looking to support ourselves from the ground up with herbs and superfoods. So this is part 2 of our series, and today's topics, we're going to talk about the common cold. We're going to talk about acute support, recovery, and a bit of stress support as well as we head into the close. So when we look at the common cold, many common colds are caused by viruses, right? So we actually have a good percentage of common colds that are caused by rhinoviruses, coronaviruses, and so forth. And there's over 200 viruses that actually cause the common cold. They can embed in the lining of our nose or throat and really sort of get a foothold. And from there, they're going to cause some of the signs and symptoms that we're going to look at in just a second. Most adults get around 2 to 3 colds per year. And children, if you have them, you will know that they get sick quite often, sometimes up to 12 times per year. And this is really not a bad thing. This is really us building up our immunity through exposure. So the common cold and viruses can be spread by air droplets, from coughs, from sneezes, and from touching infected surfaces. All right, so some of the symptoms here, you know, I'm sure we've all experienced this from time to time: stuffy nose, cough, sore throat, mucus, fever, and fatigue. And just to sort of take a step back here, I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that these are normal signs and symptoms. And in many ways, this is the body trying to get rid of things, right? So trying to get things out. You know, if we think about a stuffy nose, oftentimes that can be due to mucus, which is at the bottom. We'll get into that in a minute. It can also be due to inflammation in the sinuses and in the nasal passages. A cough is really a reflex reaction of the body trying to clear something out, right? So trying to get something out. And we're going to talk a little bit about expectorants today because we've got some herbs that can really help to facilitate that process. A sore throat, again, is oftentimes from inflammation. We might have some mucus buildup there as well. And mucus and inflammation are really signs that the body's trying to protect itself and that we're trying to sort of sequester or bind things up so that we can get things out. Same thing with fever. You know, a lot of people panic about fevers. And obviously, once you get into the 104, 105 area and above, things can get pretty dangerous. So you definitely want to pay attention to something that is too high. But normal fever is really there to signify that the body is raising its temperature to try and burn out any type of pathogenic infections. Now, when it comes to fatigue, a lot of people, you know, the North American lifestyle, we just say, you know what, I don't care if I'm tired. I don't care if I'm sick. I'm going to take some medication. I'm just going to power through it and go to work. And really, we should be resting because that is when your body is going to work through things and it's going to recover. Okay. So what we want to do is we don't necessarily want to suppress these things unless they get out of control, like a fever. We want to try and work together with the body's natural processes to try and speed up the recovery process and maybe even make it less uncomfortable and less unpleasant. I'm just going to catch up with the chat box here for a second. Okay, cool. Alrighty. So how can we support ourselves naturally? And the quote there, I live on good soup, not on fine words. All right. So good soup is definitely one way that we can do that. Nice warm foods. But a couple of tools here that we can use. One is a humidifier, right? So we can actually use cool mist humidifiers to help moisturize the air, humidify the air around us. And what that's going to do is that is going to have the benefit of moisturizing our nasal passages, our throat, and so on. Okay, so just getting the feed up there again. All right, just want to make sure that we're actually streaming here on Facebook. For some reason, we are not on Facebook, and I don't know why it keeps dropping the feed out. So I'm going to try and get this up on Facebook. Otherwise, we're going to post a video. Okay. Let me just get back to this here. Okay, you know what? I'm going to keep going on Zoom. I will try this one more time on Facebook just to get that stream up. And I'm going to keep on going on Zoom. So those of you who are with me on Zoom, thanks for sticking with me here. I don't know why the feed is dropping out on Facebook. It seems to be some kind of glitch. But we're going to hop right back into it in just a second. Okay. Let me just get this up. Okay. So we're going to be 1 second here, and then I think we're good to go. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, so I'm going to see, hopefully that feed pops up again. And if not, we're just going to upload the full video at the end of this so you can watch this in its somewhat entirety anyway. Okay. All right. So back to our presentation here. The second thing we can do, which is sort of based a little bit on hydrotherapy and a little bit of reflexology, so it sort of combines those two things together, is we can actually do so warming sock therapy, right? So what we would want to do with this is warm up our feet first under hot water and then dry them. We then cover them with light cotton socks that have been soaked in cold water. Right, so that might sound a little bit uncomfortable, but the experience here is actually quite soothing, quite calming, great thing to do before bed. What we're going to do is then cover with dry, warm woolen socks and wait for those to dry out, right? That could take anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. And much like reflexology, what it does is it really pulls things out, right? So it sort of takes a lot of the congestion and mucus out from the lungs. And I don't want to say out like it's getting it out through your feet. It more just eases things up, opens up the bronchioles, and is quite calming and soothing. So it can actually help with sleep as well. So when it comes to foods, there are really so many different foods that have antimicrobial activity. You'll actually find that a lot of herbs and spices, dare I say most, have antimicrobial properties, anti-inflammatory properties, antioxidant properties. But some of the big ones here, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, garlic is a huge one, right? So the active compound in garlic is called allicin. And allicin is a very, very powerful antimicrobial and antiviral, really helps to bolster our immune system. Ginger is another one which is really enjoying a lot of popularity, especially with what's going on right now. As a, I don't want to say a mild preventative, but more it helps to sort of keep things open in the chest, right? So if there's any mucus, if there's any inflammation, ginger can really help to sort of keep that down and break up some of the mucus. It's a powerful anti-inflammatory, has antimicrobial properties, and is also a carminative. So it can really help with digestion, with nausea, anything to that effect. Of course, honey as well, especially unpasteurized honey, raw honey, has a lot of different antimicrobial compounds in there, particularly things like propolis. But nonetheless, there is a lot of evidence that honey is a very good antibacterial, particularly. Okay, so when it comes to acute support, there are a lot of different things that we can do beyond diet and lifestyle. We're going to talk a little bit today about infection-fighting herbal formulations, and I'm just going to focus on a handful of them today because the ones that I'm going to share with you really cover a lot of different ground and actually even beyond just looking at immune support and inflammation. Just want to see if our feed is back up here. So give me 1 second. We'll see how this goes and if we're streaming. Okay. So thank you for those of you on Facebook for your patience. All right, and we're going to post this video up once we're done. So I like to work with things in combination, and I think just to take a step back and expand on that, I think I like to work with diet, with lifestyle, and with supplementation, right? A lot of people forget about the diet and the lifestyle, and we just gravitate towards supplementation. I like to put all of those things together because that's really where you see the biggest bang for your buck, but also you see the needle move forward on your health in general. So we've actually created a lot of recipes. You can go onto our social media pages. There's a ton of recipes that actually incorporate some of the things that I'm going to share with you today, as well as some of the things that we covered in part 1. So oregano oil has really been a long time favorite of mine personally. I've used it for many years in clinical practice and with myself. It is a rich source of antioxidants. It is a broad spectrum antimicrobial. So in addition to being antibacterial, antifungal, it's also antiviral and has antiparasitic properties. Now, for a lot of you watching, you might have used oregano oil for digestive infections, right? So gut infections like SIBO or Candida, but it's actually also very, very good for things like respiratory infections and also urinary tract infections, so UTIs. So you'll see the keynotes there, the last point, traveler's diarrhea, SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and fungal infections such as Candida, athlete's foot, and warts. A couple of questions that often come up with oregano oil include, what happens if I take this long-term, right? So what's that gonna do to my microbiome? My position on all antimicrobials, right? So whatever it is, these are very, very strong, right? And there's a number of reasons why I wouldn't suggest using them long-term. Okay, first of all, organisms inside of us, pathogenic organisms, can become resistant, right? So if we keep exposing Candida, for example, to oregano oil for months and months on end, it's going to become resistant to the oregano oil. Second of all, we do want to factor in that there could be long-term disruptions to our own microbiome. Okay, so in other words, we don't want to wipe out our probiotics and our good flora by taking oregano oil for extended periods of time. That said, I like to use oregano oil as a preventative. So let's say I'm going traveling, or maybe I'm going to an airport and I'm very susceptible to, getting sick. I would take that as a preventative. Obviously, it's going to shine the most when you take it as an acute support remedy. Okay, so in other words, I just got a cold or flu, or maybe you've got a yeast infection or something like that flares up. That's really when the time is to use oregano oil. Okay, I'm going to get to some of the questions here on the chat in just a second here. Oregano oil does actually work topically, yes. One thing I would caution against using it topically is you want to dilute it, okay? Sometimes, especially on open skin, it can be very, very strong, and it's going to burn a lot, all right? So you might want to just take a couple of drops, dilute it with more olive oil than what's in there, and then apply it topically like that. So we have a couple of options here. We've got oregano oil liquid capsules on the left-hand side, and then we've got oregano oil liquid herbs. So this is a tincture on the right-hand side. I think tincture is perhaps like the wrong word to use, and I'll explain what I mean by that in just a second. So you'll notice if you look to the bottom here, I'm just going to share my spotlight. If you look to the bottom here, you're going to see one capsule twice a day. Okay, these capsules are very, very strong, right? Very, very strong. They are alcohol-free and they're very concentrated. So what I would suggest is if you're someone who's very sensitive to taking things like oregano oil or olive leaf or anything antimicrobial, either start slowly, right? So start with one capsule a day, or you might want to look at the oregano oil liquid. Okay, so we actually have a regular strength and we've got extra strength. The regular strength is a 1-to-3 dilution, right? So a 1-to-3 dilution means that it's 1 part of the oregano oil to 3 parts olive oil. Okay, so it's a little bit toned down from the capsules, a little bit weaker, if you will. And the extra strength is a 1-to-1 dilution. So 1 part oregano to 1 part olive oil. Okay, so very, very strong. Now, the cool thing with oregano oil is you can literally start with 1 drop if you're very sensitive, and you can sort of stay on that for a few days and then work your way up to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, depending on what your comfort zone is. Just as a bit of a sidebar, the cavric, which is the active compound in oregano oil, these formulations here have 75 to 85% cavric in them. So Goldenseal is another one that is just so powerful and so broad spectrum. It has a compound in it called berberine, and berberine is really what does all of the magic when it comes to Goldenseal. Powerful antibacterial and antifungal agent, very, very good for promoting mucous membrane health. Okay, so what I mean by that is, in addition to our GI tract and skin, also very good for the sinuses, very good for the lungs. Okay, so you'll see their upper respiratory infections. This has a very, very long traditional use as an antibacterial. Also good for digestion, absorption, and again, that's because of its effect on the mucous membranes, in this case, the GI tract. One thing that I will say with Goldenseal is, much like oregano, but even more so with Goldenseal, you want to be careful of taking this for long periods of time. Okay, so typically what you would do is you would cycle this for 2 or 3 weeks on, and then you would take a week break to sort of give your body a bit of a chance to bounce back. Another popular herb here is thyme. So thyme has really the keynotes of thyme, very, very good for lung congestion and infection, right? So very good at breaking up mucus, and it's also known as an expectorant. So you can imagine if we're breaking up the mucus and then we're bringing that mucus up. Okay, so an expectorant is something that gets something out of our body. And in this case, particularly with colds and flus, we'll see that there's a lot of mucus buildup. So thyme will break that down. And then it's also going to help to get that mucus out of the body and therefore speed up the recovery process. So antibacterial, antiviral properties as well, and also is a carminative that can help with digestive disorders. So we have 2 formulations here. We have the cold and lung support liquid herb, and then we've got our Echinacea Goldenseal liquid herb. So as I said before, the one on the left, the cold and lung support, is really, really good for those people with heavy mucus buildup. If you've got white or green phlegm, that's really what you want to use this formula for. Promotes healthy respiratory function, is an expectorant, as we discussed before, with antispasmodic properties. So antispasmodic can actually help if someone is coughing a lot. It can really help to sort of settle that down a little bit. And also if we're having digestive issues, particularly things like diarrhea, it can help to settle that down as well. So we spoke about thyme just a minute ago, and you'll see a root in there which a lot of people might not have heard of, something called Osha root. Osha root is very, very good for all kinds of respiratory tract infections or upper respiratory infections. So that could be sinus infections, bronchitis, colds, flus, even ear infections. But it has some other benefits as well. All right, so very, very powerful anti-inflammatory, and some practitioners are actually using this for arthritic type conditions. When we look at the Echinacea Goldenseal formulation here, this relieves respiratory inflammation. So very, very powerful anti-inflammatory. Helps with mucus secretions in the respiratory tract as well. But the sort of keynotes for Echinacea is it does boost the immune system, but it also shortens the duration of colds and flus. Goldenseal, as we discussed, the active compound in there, berberine. And you should know that in this formulation, we have other types of berberine-containing herbs, such as barberry, oregano, grape, and so forth. This formulation does contain propolis, which comes from bees, so it's not 100% vegan. But propolis, as we know, has very powerful immune properties. One thing you should know, just as a bit of a sidebar, is that this formulation does contain St. John's wort. So if you're on antidepressants or you have a history of depression, you might want to just pay attention to the St. John's wort in there. So once we have sort of got through that support phase, what can we do to support ourselves naturally and essentially support ourselves with the recovery phase? So we can, I think 100% we should be focused on adrenal support. And, simply put, when our adrenals are weak and we're under stress, our cortisol levels often go out of balance, and high cortisol will suppress our immune system. So de-stressing has the net effect of supporting our immune system, as a knock-on effect. And we can do that with immune system tonics, adrenal tonics. We can do that with mindfulness. And mindfulness for you can really be anything that calms you down, whether it's taking a bath with some essential oils, whether it is taking a walk out in the woods, whether it's guided meditation, whether it's deep breathing, anything that supports you and helps calm you down and relax you. Some liver support is huge as well. So this can be done with different types of foods, with bone broths, with ferments, with herbs, but we want to take care of our liver so that we can detoxify properly, okay? And what that does is it lightens our overall body burden. Some gentle exercise, so nothing too crazy, just some gentle exercise, whether that's some light yoga, some hatha yoga, some walking, some rebounding, which is very good for the lymphatic system. That just really helps to keep our system moving and our circulation going. Saunas are another fantastic way as well to support yourself on so many different levels of health. So if you have that available to you, that is another fantastic tool to bring in. All right, so the takeaways for today: if you do get sick, slow down and rest, right? I know a lot of us don't like to do that, but it's really important that you do that because it's going to shorten the whole duration. We want to use humidifiers and warming sock treatments. Definitely look at our acute support formulations that we covered today. Once you're on the road to recovery, get back to all of your favorite prevention practices and definitely adopt some type of mindfulness-based practice. If you're unsure of any of the stuff, you can, I think you should be working with or looking for a natural health practitioner that understands natural medicine, herbs, and natural therapies. You can visit our website, botanicahealth.com, for more. And if you want to catch up with me, you can go to holistichealthmasterclass.com. I'm actually going to catch up with people on the Facebook thread once this video gets uploaded. I'm going to catch up with you in the comments section, and you can connect with me there as well. So thank you so much for today's live feed. And for those of you who are on the Zoom right now, thank you for your patience and for sticking with me. It's always a little tricky. And I do just want to take some questions at this time, because we've had some questions from part 1, and we also have a question here in the Q&A. So good question, right? At what age can children use oregano oil? I would say it really depends on the condition, right? So what are you trying to do with oregano oil? I found that for children, I would say under the age of 6, oregano oil is very, very hot, right? It's very spicy, it's very hot. So the challenge you're gonna have is with younger children under than 6, how are you gonna administer it? Because you can't give them the drops, it's gonna burn. And if you try and give them the capsules, they can't swallow the capsules. So my daughter, who's now 12, has taken oregano oil. I think the first time I gave it to her, she was around 7 or 8. Okay. Now, if you're trying to deal with a candida infection or something to that effect, that's a slightly different situation. And you might want to look at putting, it doesn't taste the greatest, but maybe putting a drop, maybe 2 drops in some juice or something that's going to mask the taste a little bit. Okay. So quite tricky with children. I'm not going to lie to you. Okay. So if there's any other questions in the chat, please do. So how long should you take herbal supplements until your body gets immune to them, and how often? So generally when we talk about taking herbals, and I'm going to sort of interpret that a little bit because I'm not 100% clear, I'm going to assume that you're talking about antimicrobial herbs. Okay, so antimicrobial herbs, I always say stick to the recommended dosages. You are able to tweak things a little bit. So, you know, let's just say you weigh 100 pounds and the next person weighs 240 pounds. You can absolutely go a little bit higher for the person who's bigger and maybe a little bit lower for the person who's smaller. Generally, what's going to happen with antimicrobials is you're going to take them for short periods of time. So to give you something to shoot at here, with SIBO, right? So small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, the literature shows us that that typically gets resolved in 8 to 12 weeks. Okay, depending on what your approach is and how you work with that. So 8 to 12 weeks is typically the norm. You might find that other infections like UTIs, for example, they can be eradicated within 3 weeks. So it really depends on what you're dealing with. But in terms of, you know, how long does it take to become resistant? I think it's really going to depend on the person. All right. And I would say that people who are taking things like oregano oil for many months on end, you want to be a little bit cautious of that. All right. So take it if you know you're going to travel, or you know that you're being exposed to something, take it. But you don't want to take it for prolonged periods. And I would say, just a ballpark here, a prolonged period would be longer than 2 months at a stretch. Okay. And even that's quite long. Okay, so a couple of questions that we got offline here through our Facebook page. When is the best time to take holy basil? Okay, so I know we didn't cover that in today's session, but last session we did. Holy basil can really be taken anytime, and I think it depends on the type of person that you are. If you tend to be a little bit more wound up and type A, that would be me. I actually like taking holy basil during the day, believe it or not. And I find that once I get to lunchtime in the afternoon, holy basil kind of makes me feel a little bit more chilled out. But for other people, it might be a little too calming for them. So you might want to look at taking holy basil at night. Okay. Some people like taking it at night because it really relaxes them, and they have a better sleep. Question here on rhodiola and ashwagandha for immunity. Rhodiola does have some immunomodulating properties, but generally both of these are going to support the immune system by balancing out our cortisol levels and helping relieve stress. Okay, so that's kind of how they work. They're not true immunomodulators in that sense. Now, another question, and we didn't cover this today either, but olive leaf for immunity. Okay, so olive leaf is very, very similar in many respects to oregano. Okay, so they have very, very broad actions, broad spectrum antimicrobials, but you're going to find that olive leaf is actually an immunomodulator. So we do have published literature to show that it can modulate or balance the immune system. It does that largely by stimulating something called phagocytosis. So phagocytosis is just a process whereby our immune system can go and sort of gobble up bacteria and debris in the body, if you will. Okay, a couple of things you should also know about olive leaf is it does lower blood pressure, and it also does lower blood sugar. Okay, so those are both good things, but again, you want to just take that into consideration with your unique case. So I think that we are done for today. I've answered all the questions. If there's no other questions in the chat box, I'm going to wrap things up. Okay, thank you so much for joining me today and for joining us here at Botanica Health. I hope you found this information session valuable, and we're going to catch up with you on our Facebook page. So last question here, does the body become resilient to vitamins? No, not really, okay, because vitamins are actually used up. So your body's never going to become resistant to vitamins. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up. Thanks so much, everyone, and for sticking with us through the technical glitches. You have yourself an awesome day. Thank you.